you can start it anytime, and I will do the introduction and introduce Doug, and we'll take it from there. And Doug, also, I imagine that you are going to share a PowerPoint, so you can share
Okay.
at any time that you want, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Just I'll let you take care of the house cleaning stuff. You tell me when you're ready, and we'll get it going.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Christina, turn on the recorder, please.
You're good.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Winner's Circle of Friday, May the 8th, 2020, RE/MAX Caribbean and Central America. The topic that we have for today is everything commercial, RE/MAX commercial, and what is commercial real estate, and what are the basics of working with commercial real estate. And for that, I will introduce my friend and colleague, Doug Winfrey. Doug is a senior brand manager at the RE/MAX World Headquarters in Denver, Colorado. Good morning, Doug. How are you doing?
Good morning, Ricardo. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
Oh, excited to have you.
Excellent.
We
Pleasure's
have,
all mine.
yeah, we have a good group of people on the line. We have 65 people so far, and more people are logging in.
Excellent.
Yes. So without further ado, Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You
All
can
right.
share yours at any time.
Okay. Just 1 second here. Let's see. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Let me see. Yes, we can see it. Absolutely, it's in full screen mode, so we're good. And we can also see your video. We can also see your video next to your PowerPoint.
Oh boy, yeah. I'm sorry, you got to deal with my face twice today. So, yeah, Ricardo, thank you for the introduction. And again, thank you all so much for being here. I can't tell you how excited we are that you've got folks in the region that are more interested in learning about commercial real estate. You know, it's a huge opportunity, you know, within the RE/MAX Commercial Network, and certainly a huge opportunity in the region that you're in. You know, just a little background about myself, so I think everyone kind of knows where I'm coming from. You know, I've been with RE/MAX for about 3 years now, and really, you know, my role as the brand manager over RE/MAX Commercial is kind of an all-encompassing role where I wear a lot of hats. You know, I think one of my kind of key roles is serving as the commercial resource at RE/MAX headquarters for any questions that come in regarding commercial, or you know, just you know, keeping an eye on trends, trying to understand what tools, resources, platforms out there exist, and you know, making sure that we bring our network tools of value to ultimately make it a little easier for them to do transactions, and again, make sure they know that they've got the support of the brand behind them. Also work with broker owners, region owners like Ricardo to grow and establish their commercial divisions. You know, it's kind of my chief concern is growing the RE/MAX Commercial brand as much as I can with the right folks. So making sure that we've got strong commercial practitioners that again are representing the brand well, you know, and you know, kind of utilizing best practices in commercial real estate, put their best foot forward, and you know, really serve as an advocate for our commercial practitioners as well. So like I mentioned earlier, when I'm doing analysis, if I come across tools or resources that exist that I think would benefit the network, you know, it's kind of my responsibility to take that to leadership within RE/MAX to say, hey, you know, these are some of the tools, resources that we need. How do we make that happen? So again, wear a lot of hats, and most importantly, I think though, I'm your frontline person if you ever have any commercial questions. I'm always, you know, phone call or an email away if you have questions about RE/MAX commercial, you know, industry in general, especially with some of the things that are going on now. That's what I'm here for. So again, please, you know, at the end of this presentation, and again, Ricardo, I'll send you this presentation that you can send out. But at the end of the presentation, you'll have all of my contact information. Again, don't hesitate to give me a buzz if you need anything, or if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, feedback. That's what I'm here for. You know, in terms of my experience, I was in the trenches, so to speak, doing commercial brokerage before coming on board with RE/MAX Commercial. I was with a Berkshire Hathaway office in Denver, and worked as part of a very small commercial team in a predominantly residential office. So not only am I familiar with the commercial real estate industry and, you know, what brokerage looks like on that side of the business, but you know, familiar with working for a franchise, working on that franchise model, and maybe more importantly, working for a franchise that's more commonly associated with residential real estate than commercial real estate. Certainly some perceived challenges, I think, when it comes to selling commercial real estate for a brand like that. But here to show you today why RE/MAX is so powerful, really what makes us unique, and most importantly, just kind of give an overview of commercial real estate, and make sure everybody's on the same page. So with that, I'm going to just jump in. So let's talk about the commercial real estate. What is commercial real estate? Tends to be a question folks think is pretty straightforward. When you think of commercial real estate, you think of buildings. When you think of residential real estate, you think of houses. And that's pretty spot on, in its most broad term and kind of all-encompassing description. Commercial real estate really is just any property that's used either exclusively for business purposes or as an income producer. So, that can range from office spaces where businesses, lease space to run their businesses, industrial properties that maybe are owned by a landlord, that are occupied by manufacturing companies, things along those lines. All of that would kind of fall under the definition of commercial real estate. And we kind of jump into it a little bit more. Depending on who you ask, there are a lot of subcategories in commercial real estate. There's subcategories and then subcategories. You could probably come up with 60 or 70 categories if you really tried commercial real estate. But, for the purpose of kind of keeping it somewhat simple, the industry's really segmented it out into 7 or 8 kind of key spaces. So those key spaces, you've got office, which again, that's going to be tenants and landlords. But there's also, outside of representing folks, that are looking to lease space, there's also the opportunity to sell office as an investment. So all of those offices that you see out there, somebody's going to own them, whether it's an LLC or an individual person. So again, I think office is probably the most common, thought of asset when it comes to commercial real estate, just because it's about as business as it gets. And then you have retail. Retail obviously has undergone some pretty major changes over the last decade or so, and really is kind of the segment that's lagging behind the most in commercial real estate. I think as we've all seen, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's possible to get on with life without having to go into an actual physical store. We've got resources like Amazon or really any e-commerce site that you can think of that ultimately a lot easier to shop from the comfort of your own home, your own laptop, without having to go out in public. So that's kind of what's pushed retail down, and we'll talk about what retail's doing kind of in response to that here a little bit later. I've got some slides that kind of cover that and what the future of retail is going to look like. And then industrial, it's probably the second most commonly thought of type of commercial real estate when people think of commercial. Those are anything from 100,000 square foot warehouses that house manufacturing companies, down to 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square foot industrial warehouses that maybe have less production going on, but still using it for storage or something along those lines. Again, that's all kind of encapsulated under the industrial assets. Then you've got multifamily. Those are apartment complexes. It can get a little tricky, in terms of what residential and commercial real estate are considered. Residential real estate, I think I have this on a slide, really is concerned with single family houses, but that can also entail small multifamily complexes as well. Generally considered anything under, maybe 4 units or so can be considered residential, but most multifamily, any apartment building that you see that has, more than 4 or 5 actual, dwellings essentially would be considered multifamily as well. Hospitality, again, it's kind of an all-encompassing one. Most of the time when we think of hospitality, we think of hotels, though, and especially I think where you all are located and kind of the commercial opportunities that exist, I would think hospitality is a huge one. So that's anything from small boutique hotels all the way up to the mega resorts or huge campuses that can sleep hundreds of folks. Land is another one that I think a lot of folks get confused with. Land is considered commercial just because it has that business purpose. Even if the business purpose is to build residential houses, single family homes, that land would still be considered a commercial asset. And then that jumps into farm and ranch as well. Just the farms and ranches producing income by whatever means they're doing, whether it's agriculturally focused or really anything that farm and ranch falls into land, which falls into commercial as well. And then you've got mixed use, which is really just a combination of any types of commercial assets. So generally, when I think of mixed use, I think of maybe a big apartment complex that has some retail spots or restaurants down on the main floor. That would be considered mixed use property, or strip malls that maybe have some office space in there, but also have retail or something along those lines. And then really you have kind of the special purpose properties, which really encapsulates all other income producing business properties that are not listed above. So that's your stadiums, parking lots, zoos, museums, theaters, all of that stuff that kind of doesn't really fit into one of those categories perfectly would kind of be considered that special use. And again, these are the broad kind of strokes of commercial real estate assets. These are the ones that you're mostly going to, see properties for, do transactions with, have clients that are either looking to invest in these types of properties or divest these properties. So, again, they can all be subcategorized even further, but again, kind of gives you the main idea of what commercial is. So, commercial transaction types. Oh, sorry, Ricardo, I think you're muted. Oh.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Please jump in anytime.
Can we go back one slide, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there are two asset types, real estate types that I don't see on the screen, and there is a little bit of confusion regarding those.
Sure.
One is lots. So, for example, maybe it is a lot within a residential area.
Sure.
Okay, but it is a lot. There is nothing built in it. So is that residential or commercial?
That's going to be commercial. That'll fall under land. And again, that's where it does get a little confusing, because a lot of times, they end up, transactions along those lines can be both commercial and residential.
Yes, thank you. And the second asset type is running businesses.
Nope. I've got that on here on the next slide, actually, under transaction types, business brokerage. That's it's a big thing, and we're seeing more and more of it in the network. So we can jump over there, commercial types of transactions, right? So you see business brokerage there, which I'll get to here in just a second, but, investment sales, that's the bulk of, the commercial transactions that our network does. And that really is, that's representing either a buyer who is looking to purchase an income producing or business purpose property, or seller representation, which is actually going out, finding sellers, prospecting for individuals that may be interested in divesting their commercial properties. So you've got the buyer representation, which again, working with the investor, seller representations, working with the actual seller. And then you have leasing activities, which make up a huge portion of the commercial real estate, brokerage community, essentially. Leasing activities a lot of times are dominated by the big players, especially when it comes to office leasing. So the CBREs or the JLLs, even if they're not in your particular market, I promise they have a hand in it, whether they're doing, property management or, they actually own the buildings without operating them. Leasing activities, generally, if it's not an investment or a divestment, are concerned with two primary activities. There's representing the tenant, which is the folks that are using the space, or representing the landlord, which is the owner who's trying to rent the space out. Leasing, I think there's misconception that leasing tends to be some of the easier transactions to do, just because you're generally not dealing with a big property asset sale where you need to go out and get millions and millions of dollars and hard money to put down to finance the deal. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Leasing gets really, really, really into the weeds. There's a lot of details that go into that. If you've got a tenant that walks in and say, maybe they need 15 or 20 offices, the odds of them walking onto a floor that has the exact floor plan that they need are pretty slim. So if you're representing the tenant, a lot of times you are negotiating with the landlord to get them to put in, the infrastructure that particular tenant needs to build out the offices. Anytime you see those signs that say built to suit, that essentially means, hey, you come in, you bring the need for space, you bring the business, so to speak, we'll build it out for you. And so when you're looking at things like that, how much money will a landlord spend to build out office space, you effectively you negotiate, and obviously the more money that a landlord's willing to put into the space, the higher the rent's going to be. So all of those things factor into what a final ultimate lease is going to look like. Leases can range anywhere from 1 year. I don't think I've ever seen any less than 1 year. However, moving forward, we might see some shorter term leases all the way up to 15, 20, 25 years. If a Walgreens or a McDonald's moves into a space that they're not purchasing, they're leasing it, those are usually 20, 25-year leases. They're long term. Again, all of that kind of factors into what a lease ultimately is going to cost a tenant, along with things like common area maintenance, insurance. We call those, kind of the triple nets, so to speak. Those are all factored into lease prices as well. So again, leasing, I could spend hours and hours talking about leasing. That's what my background was primarily in, was representing tenants on the leasing side of things. Again, it's not a bad way to get your foot into the business. Again, the deals are complicated, so a lot of times, getting some of those more complicated deals, transactions completed and on the resume, so to speak, can really set you up for success moving forward with the investment types of sales. On the landlord side of things, that's the listing company generally. So if I'm representing the landlord, my goal is to kind of maximize the potential ROI, return on investment or income that comes in from those tenants. So it's, making sure that, hey, yeah, if we're going to build out your suite, we are happy to do that, but we need to factor in those costs and ultimately, increase the rent. So, really it's kind of a balancing act doing leasing. You're working, regardless of whether or not you're representing the tenant or the landlord, your goal is to kind of strike that good balance where everybody wins, and it's, a beneficial transaction for everybody. Again, if you ever have any questions about leasing, let me know. There are books upon books upon books that are written on leasing, and generally, especially in the States, when folks that are part of the commercial real estate industry talk about, where the bulk of the income or, most potential for commissions comes from, it's usually leasing, just because those commissions, obviously they're all negotiated between tenant representation and landlord representation, but on the tenant side of things, you're generally paid, over the lifetime of the lease. So if you've got a 15, 20-year lease, that's good residual income coming in for a long time. And then to Ricardo's point, business brokerages, that has become a huge part of the RE/MAX commercial network over the last 2 years or so. I would say there's been a big push for it. And business brokerage, again, very much all-encompassing. A lot of times those transactions will include some physical real estate. So, if you're buying a car dealership that, you're primarily buying it for the name because it's been around, it's well established, there's good income. A lot of times the lot that those cars sit on, they're going to be part of the actual transaction there. Business brokerage, it does fall under commercial real estate, but it is kind of in its own category. A lot of nuances when it comes to businesses. Really the primary concern, if you're doing business brokerage and you're representing the seller, is, going over their finances and valuing what their business is worth. you know, and then if there's physical real estate included in that, you know, that can turn the transaction one way or the other. You know, if there's a lot of negative equity associated with that physical real estate, you know, that's going to affect the price in a negative way. If there's positive equity there, you know, that's going to kind of up the asking price or potential asking price for that business. Again, business brokerage, more of an emerging thing within the RE/MAX commercial network. And, you know, business brokerage is one of those that primarily, if a professional is going to focus on business brokerage, you know, that's all they focus on. They're generally not doing business brokerage and leasing or something along those lines. You know, business brokerage takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of skill, a lot of experience to get good at it. You know, a lot of due diligence, a lot of data, and so, you know, those are usually transactions that folks specialize in and focus on, as opposed to you know, a generalist who might do investment sales and also do leasing activities. You know, another emerging property management's another emerging type of you know, commercial activity that we see more and more of, you know, within RE/MAX commercial. You know, essentially, property manager is someone who is doing just that. They're managing property for an owner. You know, anytime you see those big offices, someone's got to take care of the air conditioner when it goes out, or the water fountain when it quits squirting water. So that's where property management comes in. And you know, again, kind of a balancing act as well within the leasing activities, just because a lot of times it goes with leasing activities. You know, you want to make sure that you're giving your landlord, you know, the landlord, proper representation that you're taking care of their business, but that, you know, you're also not taxing the tenants with a lot of fees or, you know, things that are ultimately going to affect what's coming out of their pocket, you know, every month. Consulting services would kind of be that you know, catch-all, so to speak, with commercial transactions, just like special purpose, you know, commercial assets. Consulting services can, you know, range anywhere from, you know, taxing services, valuation processes, you know, broker owner opinions that, you know, essentially, again, really cover kind of everything that's not considered brokerage or property management. Consulting services can be, you know, actuarial services, things along those lines. I think a lot of folks put business brokerage into consulting services, but I think the business brokerage has emerged as a big enough player that you can really separate the two. And again, certainly with what's going on in the world and, you know, where commercial real estate's headed, which I'll touch on here in just a second, I think you're going to see more and more business brokerage. You probably have a lot of folks who might be cash strapped right now, and as opposed to waiting it out 4 or 5 more years, they're saying, hey, now's the time for me to sell the business and sell the asset that goes with it, and essentially not have the headache. Yeah, so commercial versus residential. Yeah, absolutely, Ricardo. Hey, jump in anytime. I tend to talk loud and fast.
No problem. You're doing really well. Thank you.
Of course.
As a matter of fact, you have started a very active chat conversation that, you know, you don't need to look at the chat. That's
okay.
That's why Christina, and that's what Christina and I are here for. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, you're saving me.
Yes. I do want to mention that that at the end, please leave enough time for questions and answers, because
of course,
because there is a lot of questions. For example, somebody is asking about ROI, about EBITDA. People are also asking about commission fees, and so there are several good questions in the chat box. Okay, I just wanted to bring that to your attention, but please go on with your presentation.
No, and I absolutely, I appreciate that. And again, please jump in anytime. You know, some of that stuff is covered on, you know, these slides as well. So I'll certainly make sure to leave time for questions. And but again, yeah, any pressing stuff that comes through on that chat, I'm gonna leave it to you and Christina to stop me, tell me to quit talking, and answer those questions. Awesome. Yes, so looking at commercial versus residential real estate, and again, this is where we get into some of those concepts like ROI, EBITDA, you know, the financial side of things. You know, both disciplines fall under real estate, obviously, but they're very, very different disciplines. And, you know, the skill sets required to be successful in either are generally not as transferable as you would think. You know, just because someone can sell a $5 million home does not mean they can sell a $5 million industrial property and vice versa. I've never sold a residential property in my life. I don't know if I could if you put a gun to my head. It's just not my specialty. I'm a numbers guy, more analytical, kind of business minded. So commercial always spoke to me. It just there's a little bit less emotion involved, and again, it's decisions are based off of numbers and whether or not it makes sense. So again, that's big point that I do want to hammer home. Commercial, residential, very different disciplines. That does not mean that we don't have folks that do both. Especially in some of the smaller markets, we do have practitioners that do commercial transactions and residential transactions at the same time, and at any given time might have a pretty diverse pipeline of multiple commercial asset types, multiple residential asset types, and so it's possible to balance those two, but they just have to be approached. Those transactions have to be approached very differently, which I kind of jump into on this next slide. So, what are the biggest differences between commercial and residential? I get asked that all of the time. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch. There's probably a lot more differences than I've outlined here, but these are always kind of the big ones that I point to. First and foremost, it comes down to the definition. Residential real estate, those are those single family and very small multifamily properties, whereas commercial, it can be a wide variety of things, any number of different types of assets. With that, with residential kind of being pretty straightforward and only encompassing a couple of different types of things. And granted, I understand all residential transactions are different as well, but there's not a whole lot of product specialization that you have to do because you're essentially you're moving the same asset in most transactions, or very similar assets. With commercial real estate having so many subsectors, and then again breaking that down further to investment sales versus leases versus business brokerage, there's a significant amount of product specialization in commercial real estate. If you go to one of the larger firms, you look at one of the larger firms in a major city, you'll see even further, kind of siloing and product specialization within those organizations. It's not uncommon to have an entire team that maybe focuses on a 5 or 6 square block radius in a big downtown metropolitan area where all they do is represent law firms, or all they do is represent accounting firms. So specialization can go, kind of the surface level is just, hey, what asset type are we working with? Deeper into, what kind of transactions are we doing? What kind of clients are we representing? So again, it can get really, really, narrowly focused. And the idea there is, especially in those big markets, you need folks that are masters of 1 or 2 particular assets where they're the experts there. They know it inside and out. You also have generalists in commercial real estate, and that's more what the RE/MAX Commercial Network speaks to, is that generalist out there who, wants to go out, wants to hunt for, potential sellers, wants to hunt for potential buyers, and, doesn't want to be, kind of narrowly focused on one asset type. They don't just want to do industrial. Maybe they want to do industrial and multifamily, or industrial and office, or throw some retail in there if they get bored. So you can have those generalists that again do a little bit of everything. And it's a little bit more difficult. Obviously, you can't master the asset types as closely as you could if you're specializing in just one narrow area. However, you open up a whole new world of opportunity. If you're open to doing different types of transactions on different types of assets. Again, product specialization we could go really deep into, but again, I think for our purposes today, that kind of outlines it. Like I'd mentioned, residential real estate, you're generally dealing with more emotion. These are families. These are maybe a young mom and dad who are looking for their first house, or a retiring couple that is looking for a condo now that the kids are gone, off living on their own. So those emotional decisions kind of they start coming into play. It's, hey, can I live here for X amount of years? And again, it's generally a more personal purchase, and one of the largest purchases most folks will make in their life. life. So again, you're dealing not necessarily just with numbers, but personal perception, preference, and really at the end of the day, kind of wants and desires from a potential home buyer. Commercial real estate, a lot more focused on business decisions. What is the return on investment going to look like? What is the capitalization rate on a property? Those are generally the decisions that investors are making. They're looking through the rent rolls. They're trying to figure out what vacancy rates look like in a building that they might try and purchase, and what is the income going to look like? And at the end of the day, does this make financial sense? Is this going to bring in additional income for me or my company? Transactions by virtue of kind of the large. Oh, hello, Christina, you even? You guys have a question for me?
Nope.
Oh, okay, perfect. See, I told you, you just got to get my attention.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Transactions, on the residential side, they're generally going to be smaller transactions. You're dealing with folks who are going out, they're trying to get funding based off of their income, their assets, their financial situation. But generally, with the exception of, maybe the top 1 or 2%, you're not dealing with multi-million-dollar transactions. So by virtue of that, by it being a smaller amount and just the sheer amount of loan money that exists out there, generally easier to get financed for a home purchase. Again, they're looking at your income, your financial situation to make sure that, hey, at the end of the day, this person's going to be able to pay their mortgage back on time. You get into commercial real estate transactions, much more difficult to finance. Banks are looking at things like that, the return on investment, the capitalization rate, EBITDA, what is this property really producing once you, add all of the credits, deduct all of the debits? What does this look like at the end of the day? How is the bank going to make money on it, or how's an investor going to make money on it? And so again, there's a lot of kind of nuances that go into financing. Generally, a much longer process. It's not walking into a bank, telling them that you want this house, showing them your bank statements, your pay stubs, and getting money. Generally goes through several different avenues, and again, can get very involved, be very tedious, and take a long time to do. Residential, in terms of actual brokerage, excuse me, residential real estate, you're working with people who work, so you're showing them houses when they're not in the office or, not working from home, which leads to some unpredictable hours. A lot of times you're working evenings. I think weekends are pretty much a requirement for success in the residential field. Again, because you have to be flexible to meet your client schedules, work around that, and again, make that process of buying a home as straightforward as possible. Commercial real estate, much more of a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule. You're dealing with businesses primarily. If you're working with investors or buyers, they generally hold that 9 to 5 schedule. But there's a lot of professional services that are involved in commercial deals as well. So you're dealing with, not just banks, but lawyers, title companies. Generally title process quite a bit more involved than it is on the residential side of things. But you're dealing with tax professionals, all of these folks that generally work that Monday through Friday 9 to 5, and that's probably the biggest benefit of commercial. We all work on the weekends, we all work on nights. Just because it's kind of a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday schedule doesn't mean, you're not still working at nights on the weekends doing research or due diligence, but you're primarily not interacting with clients outside of those hours. In terms of, and it kind of alludes to the size of the deals. There's usually less decision makers involved in residential real estate. You're, dealing again, maybe with the husband and a wife. Kids might have some input, but, ultimately, once the financing's gone through, you're dealing with a couple of key players who are ultimately going to decide if this house works or doesn't work. On the commercial side of things, there's several decision makers. You've got a finance department that's going to be involved, or a financial expert who's going to be involved to make sure that it is a smart investment, it makes logical sense, that it's going to work. If it's a large company, you might be dealing with several department heads that ultimately report up to one decision maker. So by virtue of that, anytime you're doing a commercial transaction, you're interfacing with either a client or whether that client's a seller or a buyer. You always have to have your game face on, because everyone's input really goes into that ultimate decision of whether or not a transaction is going to go through. By virtue of that, deals take much longer on the commercial side of things. Certainly one of the factors for commercial deals taking longer than residential deals is the fact that you're working with lots of decision makers. So, you've got to coordinate schedules. You've got to, make sure to get buy-in from all of the right people. And then again, you've got a difficult financing process usually. There's always a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiations, due diligence it's involved in. Again, just the sheer amount of professional services that you have to, kind of work through to get a commercial deal from start to finish can take, an extensive amount of time. It's not uncommon for commercial deals to take years and years to do. Generally, kind of rule of thumb, the bigger the transaction, the longer it's going to take to do. Leasing, if you're looking at doing leasing deals and you're representing large companies, those companies aren't waiting until 1 or 2 months before their lease is up to start doing their, their search if they're looking to move. Most of those companies are 3, 4, 5 years ahead of it if they know that they have to move, whether they're relocating or just need different space. So that process starts very, very early for them because those deals can take so long. As again, opposed to the residential side of things, deals can be closed relatively quickly. Certainly, if you're bringing cash to the table, those deals close much quicker. But again, they're generally less complicated. They're pretty straightforward. And again, they so long as you're well versed in your profession and kind of know what you're doing and have that experience behind you, you can navigate those residential deals, pretty seamlessly.
Doug?
Yes, sir.
Just to interject, and I will always try to interject a bit when you change the slides, okay?
Yeah, perfect.
And also, I want to let everybody know that I just uploaded this PowerPoint that Doug is using. It is uploaded to the chat section. So,
look at that.
So please go to the chat section, download it from there. Also, guys, in the chat section, please type in your questions, and I will make sure we're putting all the questions together, and we will ask them in the Q&A section. Okay. So if you have any questions, type them in, please. Okay, back to you, Doug.
Thanks, Ricardo. And yeah, to that point, please let me know what you think of this presentation. It's brand new. I just put it together this week, kind of based off of the feedback and the polling numbers from the poll that Ricardo put on Facebook. So any feedback that you have, let me know. Generally when I talk about commercial real estate, I'm talking specifically about RE/MAX. So I love doing this. This is the kind of stuff that excites me. Talking about what the industry actually does. It's why I'm in the industry. But if there's anything that you think I can cover more or should cover less, please let me know. And hey, the network thanks you. So I'll continue to refine it. So
there is one more comment.
Please.
Okay, so 80% of the people attending in the audience, 80% of them are, RE/MAX members.
Sure.
However, we are honored that we also have maybe 10 or 20% of special guests.
Excellent.
These are people from the industry. They are our colleagues. They are our friends. We want to welcome them. We're very glad that you're here. Please learn as much as you can. Enjoy yourselves. Consider us your tribe. And just enjoy the presentation and learn as much as you can.
Absolutely. And here in the next couple of minutes, I get in a little bit to the network, what makes RE/MAX unique. But certainly, Ricardo, for your special guests or folks who are trying to learn more about RE/MAX Commercial, let me know if you all have any questions afterwards. I'm happy to jump on one-on-one conversations. And
thank you. I believe that the largest number of guests comes from Panama. So
well, welcome.
RE/MAX Panama. So
that's exciting.
Panama is prime market for commercial real estate. I don't know if you've ever been to Panama, but Panama is like a small Miami in
right.
America. It is such an amazing city. So welcome.
Beautiful. Yeah, okay. Well, welcome everybody. And again, if you have any questions afterwards, let me know. So Commercial real estate, what do you need to know about commercial real estate? When you're considering whether or not you want to jump into the commercial side of the businesses, here's some of the considerations to take in. There's generally much higher barriers to entry to succeed in commercial real estate than there is in residential. A big one is going to be, what does your income look like going into it? Like I said, it can take a couple of years to close a commercial deal. So if, the first transaction you work on ends up being a big one that is very involved and takes a while, it might be a couple of years before you see, the fruits of your labor or any income that rolls in from there. There's also less technology and resources available than in residential real estate. That's changing though. There's been a big push for technology in the commercial space. So we're seeing a lot of new tools come out, a lot of exciting companies, which is great. There's certainly a lot of progress that needs to be made on that front, but we're looking at a time where commercial is moving closer to residential in terms of tools and resources. But still, if you're coming at this with a residential background, you'll probably be surprised at the lack of tools that exist and how hard you actually have to dig to find some of the stuff. Commercial real estate, big commissions. Again, commissions are always going to be negotiated between buyer's agent, seller's agent, tenant, landlord, but they're strong commissions. And so by virtue of that, there's intense competition in the commercial real estate space. Most industry folks get along pretty well, or at least play nice with each other, but at the same time, everyone kind of watches their own back because that's just how the industry is, and it's always been defined by that competitive nature. Who can find the best seller, who can find the most qualified buyer, and again, that breeds competitiveness throughout the industry, especially in bigger cities, bigger markets. Requires very, very much strong financial acumen. You are doing calculations to figure out what a return on investment is going to look like, or, what is your EBITDA, but it goes deeper than that too. A lot of times, especially if you're working on a building that has existing tenants, you're looking at rent rolls, you're trying to figure out vacancy rates, you're doing a lot of calculations, a lot of work with spreadsheets, and then valuation comes into it. There's several different ways to value commercial properties. You're not just looking at what the market's doing and what comparables look like you do in residential. You've got to take a whole different host of factors into consideration that, I won't jump into them because we'll be here all day if I do. But again, you're looking at finances. You've got to know those numbers, or you've got to have someone on your team who knows those numbers. The other things you see, again, residential real estate, pretty straightforward in terms of what a transaction is going to look like from start to finish. Commercial real estate, there really are no two transactions that are the same. There's always big factors, whether it's a zoning issue that comes up at the last minute, or financing question. There's always going to be factors that make transactions very, very different. And really, you can look at that two ways. One, that can be a challenge, or two, you can kind of take it from the approach that you're going to learn something new in every transaction and be better for it. The other thing that you have to look at, and again, I know I've mentioned it a couple of times, that there's a lot of professional services involved in closing transactions. Lawyers, accounting firms, title companies, bankers, goes on and on and on. So you have to have a strong roster of contacts, that are pretty diverse across that industry to be successful, especially with RE/MAX, where we try and be kind of full concierge, commercial practitioners. If you're helping someone buy let's say an office building for $5 million, the expectation is that you're going to have a lawyer to refer them to, a banker to refer them to if they need financing, investors to refer them to. You have to have those contacts to keep the deal flow process moving, just because since they move so slow, you want to make sure it doesn't get caught up or tangled or anything. Keys to success in commercial real estate, really patience and persistence. Those deals take a while, and it's tough. You're dealing with, again, less emotion, pure business decisions. So you've got to be very persistent. You can't smooth talk somebody into selling their $10 million asset if they're not interested in selling. So, you have to have those realistic expectations too, that, you're going to go through a lot of conversations that don't yield any results. You're going to go through, probably pretty deep down the process several times in commercial transactions that, ultimately fall apart. So you have to be realistic, but again, have that patience and persistence. Again, just because of the community that you're dealing with, a high level of professionalism and, business acumen. You generally don't want to show up a $5 million industrial property in flip-flops, jeans, and a t-shirt. Folks are looking at you to be the professional, and really, kind of how you look, that first impression, can make or break you in terms of securing business. Commercial real estate industry keeps changing too. So you've got to be up to date on your knowledge. You've got to be committed to, utilizing the education that exists out there, accessing that education to make sure you know what every asset, what every market is doing, to, ultimately be able to educate your clients, whether they're buyers or sellers. You've got to be well-known, well-networked, well-seen. So you have to have a commitment to being involved with some of these industry organizations. There's three big ones in commercial real estate: CCIM, SIOR, and ICSC. But also, being involved with NAR is strong too. And ultimately, you got to look at every person that you meet within these organizations as someone that you could potentially be sitting across the table from at some point. Again, whether they're doing commercial brokerage or in professional services, but you've got to be involved in those industries. That's where deals are done. Fish where the fish are, right? And then again, all of those professional services, you've got to be able to network with those professionals, have a good roster of them, folks that you trust, that you can essentially recommend. Ricardo, are you talking to me? You're on mute. All right, he's not.
We're good. We're good.
Okay, perfect. So just real quick, current landscape opportunities. There's lots of activity in the industrial space. Kind of this concept of the last mile, that more and more industrial space is going to be closer to cities. Major hubs. Amazon's a perfect example. 5 years ago, when I'd order something from Amazon, I would expect it to take a week. About 3 years ago, I'd order it from Amazon and I would expect it the next day. And now most of the time, if I order something from Amazon, I expect it to be at my house in a couple of hours. And so you have to have these distribution centers that are close to big cities like Denver. And we're going to see more and more of that as, kind of that immediate need, for goods and, things like that kind of becomes more prevalent across the globe. Multifamily is always a strong investment, or it has been for a long time. With everything that's going on in the world, there is some talk about some of these hotels that maybe don't have a lot of customers right now, maybe regearing, retooling, repurposing those hotels, especially the smaller, more boutique hotels, into multifamily assets, just to recoup some of their loss. And again, look for an alternative income stream as hospitality, falls as less people are traveling. Retail, like we talked about, continues to fall. Folks are realizing they don't have to go into physical stores to get what they need. Mixed use and specialty assets are becoming more and more diverse. Again, it's not uncommon to go to a strip mall that might have some office space, maybe a medical, emergency care in there is next to a taco or a burger joint, something along those lines. So a lot of diversity coming there. And again, I think there's going to be more and more diversity. Changes are on the horizon for office space. I think it's pretty clear that when we emerge from everything that's going on around the globe right now, there's going to be less people in the office. I think companies have realized that a lot of their employees can be successful on working from home, and ultimately don't want to stack people on top of each other because we don't want to spread diseases to each other. So there's going to be a lot of large tenants that look to alter their lease for smaller space. There's going to be landlords that have to deal with tenants that maybe didn't make it through what we're currently going on, so they've got to release that space, which comes with its own set of challenges in terms of building it out and all of that. So big changes on the horizon for office. No one really knows when they're going to hit or exactly what they're going to look like, but safe to say that the rules for engagement on that side of the business are going to change. And then just greater emphasis on land use. Whether that's buying buying a lot to ultimately build residential homes on, or starting a hunting company is a new one that I've seen, where they're looking for hundreds upon hundreds of acres. But there's this idea that, hey, land can be more than land; it can produce its own income, and by virtue of that, just more and more use for it. So kind of some of the big focus areas. What's ahead for commercial real estate coming out of this? A global marketplace. Borders are eroding. Investors, are less geographic focused than they are income focused. So, you've got investors from all over the world investing all over the world. More diversity. The workforce is changing. We're getting a lot more minorities in the industry, a lot of younger folks as well, as kind of the old guard, the veterans in commercial real estate continue to retire. Better technology, like I'd mentioned, that's on the horizon. And then really the decentralization of information, which as more technology comes out, more information will be available. It'll be easier to pull history on a particular building or something along those lines, which ultimately will kind of lead to more smaller commercial real estate firms emerging, because there's less barriers to entry at that point. And really, if you're not controlling the information, you've got to give a very high level of customer service to win business. So there's going to be a stronger focus on relationships and customer service as technology kind of leads to this decentralization of information. And then just very quickly, I want to go over kind of RE/MAX commercial. So yeah, again, that kind of a very high level overview, commercial real estate in 50 minutes right there. So any questions that you have that I can answer, please let me know. But RE/MAX, where we're at now, we're at about 4,100 commercial practitioners. That puts us in terms of volume, number 12 in the industry in terms of number of transactions we do. Last year we did about 13.5 billion in transactions, which was just over 38,000 deals that were done. We've got visibility through the industry. We're constantly named to commercial real estate rankings, surveys that rank either off of volume or public perception of the company. But RE/MAX has a presence in a lot of those. Strong standing with CCIM, as you can see there. We've had 4 presidents over the last several years. We're number 6 in terms of number of designees that have their CCIM. So again, just visibility throughout the network. Leveraging the commercial brand. Generally, we don't put the balloon on anything. You can kind of see the property signs to the left and right of this slide. Commercial, the way that I look at it, it's leveraging the brand a different way. You're not using the balloon, but you're using a logo that is unmistakably RE/MAX, and kind of brings the connotations of success and that brand recognition to the mind of folks. Biggest kind of attractor to the RE/MAX commercial model is the fact that we don't force our commercial practitioners to specialize. Like I'd mentioned earlier, they can be generalists, work any type of assets, any type of properties, in any type of market. You've got our global brand recognition, which is huge. We've got 47 years of doing business successfully. So, there's a lot of confidence when you sit down, you're working with an investor, and you're part of, one of the most recognized brands in real estate. Then you also have that referral base. We've got 4,100 commercial practitioners, but we have a greater network of 130,000 plus that can certainly be tapped for referrals. Most of our residential agents, like I'd mentioned, focus specifically on residential, and most of our commercial agents focus specifically on commercial. So you've got 125,000 plus residential agents across the globe. That's a lot of people to reach out to and say, hey, do you have any commercial leads that you could send my way? So those are kind of the high level points. Again, like I said, RE/MAX commercial, it's your business, your way. Work the assets you want in the market you want. Again, just our position in the industry, where that 13.5 puts us, number 12. But we also have an established network. Most of our folks within RE/MAX have been in the industry for 15 plus years, 8 of those with RE/MAX. They come to RE/MAX to kind of be in a more entrepreneurial environment where they can be in business for themselves, but not by themselves. And then they stick around. And like you saw, it's a strong roster of talent. Some great folks in the industry that are visible, some of the organizations, and all of that. Again, as a RE/MAX commercial practitioner, you have the ability to leverage the size, scope, and reach of our network, as long as the visibility of our brand to go out, hunt for business, do deals, get referrals, worldwide business partners. We're in close to 80 countries on the commercial side of the business, so not uncommon for someone in Canada to do a deal in China, or someone in Australia to do a deal with someone who is representing a client in Africa or something along those lines. But again, that's all kind of points to the borders eroding as well. Just our industry partnerships, we're very active in them, both on the commercial specific industries and residential industries. Training, and this is great, and Ricardo, I'll send something out that goes a little deeper into this training, but we do have some fantastic training available through RE/MAX University. A couple of courses that can be taken either in person at some of our live events throughout the year, like R4, but they can also be taken on demand online. Courses that cover everything from commercial real estate basics, again, ROI, EBITDA, net income, how you calculate all of that, all the way to courses that dive a little bit deeper into how to be successful, how to market for clients, how to look for properties, how to, essentially put your best foot forward and succeed in commercial real estate. Again, those courses held throughout the year, again, at R4 and Commercial Symposium, I'll talk about here in one second. And then there's always training at industry events, with our partnerships. A lot of times our network can get discounts to some of that training as well. But again, I'll send something out because I could spend a lot of time talking about training. We've got this strong network of 4,100 folks. We try and connect them as often as we can. So at our floor, you'll find multiple commercial events throughout the week. Again, the Commercial Symposium, which this year is going to be held September 13th through September 15th in Denver, brings out, a couple hundred folks from the network who are either commercial focused practitioners or residential agents who might be interested in commercial. But again, it's a huge opportunity to come learn what the industry is doing, and more importantly, network with other RE/MAX commercial practitioners. A lot of deals come from these events, these mixers. Again, these are business-minded folks, so referrals are passed back and forth. We're doing more and more on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. There should be, off the record, there's going to be a Facebook group launched for RE/MAX Commercial. That's specific to RE/MAX Commercial, where we can kind of post resources, interviews, things along those lines. But we're going to be getting more and more active on social media, again, just to try and better connect the network. Commercial newsletter, we send a couple of those out every year. And then our global deal calls, which essentially, it's an opportunity for folks in the network to submit commercial properties to be, kind of displayed and presented to the rest of the network on these webinars. Properties range anywhere from $1 million to $50 million. Usually you submit these properties, you jump on the webinar, you've got a couple of minutes to talk about the asset that you're looking to list. I think our last deal call, we had close to 40 properties, but about 250 people who were on the webinar listening to it. So again, good exposure, good opportunity to get your properties out there within the network. The MAX Center, that's really just going to be your place for resources that Ricardo doesn't have for you. Our ad campaigns, resource guides, some marketing material, recruiting material. It's kind of our catch-all area where we put all of the commercial content that anyone could need up there. And then just to finish up, here's some ads from our new campaign. Our marketing creative team did a fantastic job. When they created these just a couple of weeks ago is when they were released. So, some of the ad campaigns, again, not an exhaustive list, but you can kind of see that they are, very professional, very commercial, gives you something to use to, again, differentiate yourself from the residential network. And I think I finished with a couple of minutes. I can answer questions as long as you like. I have to ask, give me 1 second. I've got to get my my kid his laptop. He's doing work right now.
No problem, Doug. No problem at all. Many people have children in their houses. I know that my daughters have their children with them, and I know
the
that
reality of working from home, Ricardo. It's all good.
Hey, I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old here. The fact that none of them knocked on the door for almost an hour it's a miracle.
Doug, we
Absolutely.
have several questions for you.
Please, no, and again, yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the new presentation. I know it's a lot of stuff to cover. Hopefully, I did it justice, and again, we'll get this out to everybody. But yeah, please go ahead, Ricardo. Jump in with questions.
Okay, so I believe we have 3 or 4 questions. The first one is, where can we find large investors looking to buy an entire beach or hundreds of acres of large hotels or large businesses? Where do we find them?
You know, that's always the $1 million question, right? How do you find the people that have the money that are willing to spend it? We're fortunate in the RE/MAX network that we're large enough that I think most folks, if they have clients with needs, you know, they go to the network first. You know, it's easy if you've got, you know, contacts, Asia especially. There's a lot of money coming in from Asia right now, both to the US, but also to Central America, Latin America, a lot of big investors from Mexico as well, you know, Canada, you know, and we've got a strong contingency, a strong presence in all of these major countries. So really, you know, where I see most of the deals in our network that happen that are, you know, kind of more on that side, you know, large multi-million dollar deals, it's folks just kind of taking advantage of the network, getting to know people, reaching out. Hey, you know, do you have investors looking for X, Y, and Z? How can I help you? And then there's some resources out there, you know, some databases that you can buy into, you know, that might have information on, you know, potential investors. But really, it's a lot of due diligence. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of phone calls, and it's being told no a lot more than they're told yes. But, you know, if you look at Marcus and Millichap, they're huge in the U.S., big investment, commercial brokerage. Marcus and Millichap, when you start with them, they essentially expect you to make 300 to 400 phone calls a week, reaching out to potential, you know, buyers, you know, high net worth individuals if you're looking to sell assets, but also reaching out to business owners just nonstop, you know, on the phone, smiling, sending out emails, doing whatever you have to do. But it really becomes a numbers game. You know, you've got that sales funnel where if you reach out to enough people, eventually you're going to get some good leads. You know, some of those leads will come to fruition, some won't, but it's that idea that it all kind of trickles down. Yeah, again, it's a tough question to answer. Yeah.
Doug?
Yes, sir.
Allow me to interject a little bit regarding that question.
Please. Okay.
So I would say that to find, you know, big investors and buyers, your first resource is MAX Center.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me finish, please. Okay. So you need to go to MAX Center. You need to do a search of RE/MAX agents that specialize in RE/MAX commercial or in commercial real estate. There is a field that you can click. Within that field, you will see several subspecialties. You need to find the CCIMs. CCIM stands for Certified Commercial Investment Management. Okay, so look for CCIMs. Then call them. You need to get on the phone and call these people. I can assure you, if you call 10 of these people, that is a lot more powerful than sending out 1,000 emails to people that don't care.
Correct.
You call these people and you tell them, hi, I found your name in MAX Center. I am calling from Nicaragua. Is it okay to send you an email? And then nobody's going to say no to that. And,
right.
and then you say, by the way, have you ever been to Nicaragua? It's a wonderful place. If you come here, I'm going to take you horseback riding. We're going to have so much fun at the beach. And oh, by the way, we're going to tour 3 large commercial deals that I'm promoting. Tell me when it's a good time to come to Nicaragua. Bring your family. It's going to be a tax deduction, and we're going to have so much fun here. So, guys, at the end of the day, please remember that this is a people business, and people don't buy from people that they don't know. People buy from people that they like. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to the next question.
Perfect.
Okay, the next question is, okay, I'm going to make an introduction to this question first.
Perfect.
Because I know that you are from RE/MAX Global Headquarters, and I know that RE/MAX Global Headquarters does not discuss fees, because it can be seen as price fixing, which is illegal in the United States. However, there is a question, and Doug, please know that the laws are different in different countries. Also, we have people from 30 different countries on the line.
Sure.
So it is not price fixing, because whatever they do in Costa Rica doesn't have anything to do with what they do in Aruba or Cayman Islands.
Sure.
Okay, so the question is, with that introduction, the question is, what are the fees or range of fees that we charge to sell businesses, to sell commercial real estate, investment real estate? And then we're going to move on to two more questions, Doug. So, okay. Doug, in general, and I know that you can only talk in general regarding fees. In general, what's your thoughts about fees?
Yeah, I can tell you in general what, I see in the caveat kind of being the larger the deal is, the smaller the percentage is probably going to be, but they can be competitive with residential fees, all the way, down if you're doing $100 million deals, a couple of percentage points maybe split between a couple of properties. But, if it's a smaller deal or a really motivated seller, it's all ultimately what you negotiate with the seller. But, they can be competitive with the residential side of the business. Not uncommon to see a big deal where it's maybe 2 or 3%, on that, but also not uncommon to see deals that, maybe are closer to 7 or 8%. And again, fees are dealt with a little different in commercial real estate. Generally, if you're working on a lease, sometimes they'll take the ultimate value of that lease and then give a percentage commission. But a lot of times what you're dealing with are landlords that, will give a certain amount, certain dollar amount per square foot that you rent out. And then again, they factor that over the lifetime of the lease. So there's a lot of different factors. I guess that would be kind of the big takeaway, is that commissions are a lot more complicated in commercial. There's a lot more different structures that come in. There's generally a lot more negotiating that comes in. But ultimately, like Ricardo said, this is a relationship business where you have to have connections. You have to have a network to ultimately, find buyers if you're representing a seller, or find sellers if you're representing a buyer. Both sides of the transaction know that. They know that, they're hiring you, they're working with you for your expertise, your ability to navigate a transaction, but also for your ability to kind of be that matchmaker and find the right asset for the right investor. And awesome. So, again, commissions can vary wildly from set fees to percentages to dollar amount per square foot. But again, for where we play, I would say they're very similar to the residential side of things for the most part.
Okay. Now, the last question that we have, and we have several, but I have tried to simplify, and sometimes.
Yeah, and if you email me any additional questions, Ricardo, I'll answer them and get it back to you so you can distribute it.
Thank you. Now, the last question is, what do you recommend for brand new agents that want to start in commercial real estate?
Yeah, that's an easy one to answer. Thank you. I'm glad you saved that one for last. A couple of things. One, again, I think you've got to make that commitment. But you need to know what you're getting into. Again, we covered a couple of slides covered what it takes to succeed in commercial real estate, factors that need to be considered. But you probably want to go a little bit deeper than that. Do a little more research. I would say a great place to start if you're brand new, don't know much about commercial, is the Max Center. RE/MAX University, some of our training. We have the ACP course. It's the Accredited Commercial Professional course that really lays the foundation, lays that groundwork of commercial real estate. It goes through the different asset types that I did in a little more detail, what it takes to be successful in those asset types, considerations that you need to know. It'll dive a lot deeper into the financial knowledge that you need to have, or need to have access to, to be successful in the commercial space. And really, it does a great job of highlighting in a lot more detail than I was able to today, the differences between commercial real estate and residential real estate. Most folks will take that course and they come out and they have an answer to the question of whether or not they want to get in commercial. Most folks do it and they get excited, especially because of the activity we have in our commercial network now. But a lot of folks will take that course and say, man, I don't want to do that financial stuff. That just sounds boring to me. I'd rather, work with home buyers that are looking to make more of a personal purchase. But again, it'll answer that question. It'll let you know what you're getting into. And then we have, after that, the course I would recommend taking would be the course that was created and just released by one of our veteran commercial practitioners named Mark Holsey. Mark is a fantastic resource, almost 20 years with the network, runs one of the most successful teams within RE/MAX Commercial, where the ACP course is very foundational, kind of a Business 101, Commercial Brokerage 101. Mark's course is a lot more focused on, okay, the business. How are you successful in the business? How do you go out? How do you find good clients? How do you successfully market a property? What to look for when, interviewing potential investors or potential sellers to make sure that you're not getting in above your head, how to set expectations with buyers and sellers, really the kind of what you need to know to be successful and to represent the brand well is Mark's training. And then it goes even deeper and deeper. There's a lot of education in commercial real estate. The successful ones are the ones that continue to learn. CCIM provides fantastic training, especially on the financial analysis and valuation side of commercial real estate. But it's twofold. If you're taking courses to become a CCIM or an SIOR, you're learning valuable skills, you're learning what the industry's doing, you're learning what you need to close more complex transactions, but you're also gaining a huge network of folks. CCIM, SIOR, very, very, very well networked organizations where, a lot of business is done in those organizations. If you're looking for the biggest.
That's very valuable. That's very good advice. Thank you. Now, Doug, I think we're going to need to wrap up. I am very I apologize that I interrupted. Now I need to share who is our next speaker, but for next Friday, a week from today. But Doug, we want to thank you very much for your effort, for all the information that you have provided to us. This recording, because we recorded this meeting, this recording will be sent out to everybody on Wednesday, as we always do. On Wednesday of next week, we send out the recording from today and the invitation for next Friday. Doug, thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, Ricardo, any more questions that come in over the weekend, send them to me. I'll get them answered and make sure that can go out with everything that you send out on Wednesday.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, guys, our speaker for next Friday, I think everybody, you cannot, okay, please stop sharing those.
Yes. Thank you again, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to start sharing my screen and oh, what happened here? I did the wrong share, I think. New share, I'm gonna share here and here. And guys, the next speaker will be my friend Dario Castiglia from RE/MAX Italy. Guys, I want to bring your attention to this. Dario Castiglia is the region owner of RE/MAX Italy. They have been Region of the Year several times, and they have 4,100 agents in Italy. Italy is not a very large country, but well, I don't even want to get started. But I think that we're truly in for a treat. This is going to be next Friday. Dario specializes in talking to entrepreneurs. And I know that we have a lot of, everybody on the line is an entrepreneur, really. So I think we're in for a treat. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Don't miss it. A week from today, Dario Castiglia, RE/MAX Italy. With that, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and see you guys in a week.
Thank you, Doug.
Cheers, Doug. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Evaristo from Puerto Rico. We want to welcome Christian Salva, which is a commercial real estate broker independent in Puerto Rico, who's we're going to give him some introduction to our RE/MAX commercial real estate. So welcome, Christian Salva from Puerto Rico.
Welcome, Christian.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Jackie.
Test.
Ay, Dios. Ay, Dios. Encierra.